Before we begin, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. If you like my stories, please consider giving me like and subscribe. It means the whole world to me. Enjoy the stories, and I hope you get the scare you're looking for. The wind howled through the broken shutters of the old farmhouse, rattling them like bones in a forgotten grave. Emily gripped the steering wheel tighter as the rain came down in sheets, her headlights slicing through the darkness like knives. The road had disappeared behind her a long time ago, replaced by an unmarked path swallowed by the woods. The GPS had long since lost signal. She had only meant to take a shortcut. The farmhouse appeared out of the storm like a wound in the land. Rotting wood, sunken roof, the porch sagging like the mouth of a dead thing. She should have turned back, but the engine was sputtering and her phone was dead. She needed shelter. Just until morning, the front door creaked open under her hand. The smell hit her first: mildew, rot, and something faintly metallic. The hallway was long and dark, lit only by flashes of lightning through cracked windows. Water dripped somewhere deep inside. Her footsteps echoed off the wooden floor as she moved through the house, the boards groaning beneath her weight. There were signs that someone had lived here once. Faded photographs on the wall, the faces scratched out. A dusty armchair turned toward an empty fireplace. A child's toy left in the middle of the hallway, its porcelain face shattered. Her breath caught when she saw that the toy's body was still clean. No dust, recently moved. She told herself it was nothing. The stairs at the end of the hall were crooked but held her weight. She found a bedroom with a bed still intact. The sheets smelled old but dry. Exhaustion took over. She lay down, hoping sleep would come quickly. It didn't. She woke hours later, heart pounding, unsure why. The house was silent. Too silent. No wind, no rain, just nothing. Then she heard it. A soft, dragging sound downstairs. Like something being pulled across the floor. Slow, deliberate. She held her breath, straining to hear more. Another sound followed. A whisper, too faint to understand. She got up, moved toward the door. It opened before she touched it. There was no one on the landing, but the hallway was darker than before, as if the shadows had thickened. Something was off. She moved slowly, step by step, toward the stairs. They stretched downward like a mouth ready to swallow her. Halfway down, she heard it again. The dragging, closer now. It wasn't coming from the first floor anymore. It was coming from the basement. She hadn't noticed a door before, but now it was there, barely visible at the bottom of the stairs. Something knocked softly from the other side. 3 knocks, then silence. She didn't want to move. Every part of her screamed to run, but her legs betrayed her, carrying her closer. Her hand reached for the knob as if under someone else's control. The door swung open on its own. The basement was pitch black. The light from the hall stopped at the threshold like it was afraid to go any further. But something was down there, watching, waiting. A sudden blast of cold air hit her and she stumbled back. The door slammed shut. Behind her, the child's toy was back in the hallway, whole, smiling. She ran upstairs. Back in the bedroom, she locked the door and shoved a chair beneath the handle. Her breathing was ragged. Her hands shook. She needed to get out. First light wasn't far. She could wait. But then she saw the mirror. It hadn't been there before. It was old, spotted. The glass warped slightly. Her reflection stared back, but something was wrong. It wasn't moving. Emily took a step. Her reflection stayed still. Then it smiled. Her real face didn't move. The reflection lifted its hand. Emily didn't. It placed its palm against the glass. A crack formed. Then another. The glass spiderwebbed outward, as if something was pressing from the other side. She turned and ran, just as the mirror shattered behind her, shards hitting the floor like frozen rain. She didn't look back. The house had changed. The hallway was longer now. Rooms appeared where there had been none. The windows were gone. Every step felt heavier, the air thicker. She turned a corner and found herself in the same hallway again. The same toy on the floor. No matter where she went, the house bent around her. Then she heard footsteps, soft, barefoot, following her. She spun around. Nothing. But the air felt charged, like something was right behind her, just out of sight. She ducked into a room and closed the door quietly. It was a nursery, old, forgotten. A crib covered in dust, a mobile swaying though there was no breeze. A faint lullaby played somewhere. Off-key, slowed. The closet door creaked open. She couldn't help it. She looked. Inside were no clothes, just mirrors. Dozens of them. Each one showed her standing there, but in each reflection something was behind her. A pale hand on her shoulder, a face over hers, eyes black as coal. She turned around. No one. When she looked back, all the mirrors were broken. The door to the room was gone. She screamed, pounded the walls, but they didn't budge. The nursery was shrinking, the ceiling lowering, the walls pressing inward. The lullaby grew louder, distorted. Then it stopped. Silence, and the sound of breathing right beside her ear. She blacked out. When she woke, she was outside, lying in the middle of the overgrown field, the house behind her silent and dark. Her car was gone. Her phone gone. The storm had passed, the sky gray with morning light. She didn't question it. She ran. She found the road again. Eventually, a truck picked her up. The driver asked if she was okay, if she needed a hospital. She just asked to be taken anywhere far from there. She didn't talk about what happened. She told herself it was a nightmare until a week later, when she passed a mirror in her apartment, and her reflection smiled before she did. It followed her. Whatever was in that house had left with her. At night, she hears knocks on her closet door. Always 3. Sometimes she wakes up with dirt under her nails, even though she swears she hasn't been outside. Last night, she found a photograph in her kitchen drawer. Old, faded. It showed the farmhouse and her standing in the window, smiling. She doesn't remember taking it. And in the corner of the photo, barely visible, is a child's toy. Porcelain, broken. The house on the edge of town was a husk, its windows like empty eyes staring out at the world. Paint peeled from its siding, curling like dead skin, and the porch sagged under the weight of neglect. I'd driven past it countless times, always wondering why no one tore it down. It was the kind of place kids dared each other to approach, whispering stories of ghosts and vanishings. But I wasn't a kid anymore, and I wasn't here on a dare. I was here because of the letter. It arrived in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just my name scrawled in jagged ink. Sarah. Inside, a single sentence. You're the only one who can find her. No signature, no explanation, but clipped to the note was a faded Polaroid of my sister, Emily, who disappeared 10 years ago. She was smiling in the photo, her hair catching the sunlight, standing in front of that same decaying house. My hands shook as I held it. Emily was gone. Everyone said so. The police had searched, the town had mourned, and I'd spent a decade trying to forget. But the letter, the photo, it was like a hook in my chest, pulling me toward that house. I parked my car at the end of the overgrown driveway, the engine ticking as it cooled. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something sharper like rust. My flashlight beam cut through the dusk, bouncing off the warped boards of the porch. The front door was ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling out. I gripped the letter in my pocket, the Polaroid crinkling against my fingers, and stepped inside. The air inside was colder than it should have been, heavy with the smell of mildew and something faintly metallic. My sneakers squeaked on the warped floorboards, each step echoing in the silence. The foyer opened into a living room, its furniture draped in sheets, gray with dust. A staircase spiraled upward into shadow, and a hallway stretched toward the back of the house. I called out, "Emily?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the quiet. No answer. Of course not. She couldn't be here, could she? I moved deeper, my flashlight catching glints of cobwebs and cracked plaster. The letter had said I'd find her, but it didn't say where or how. My heart thudded, a mix of hope and dread. Emily had been my older sister, my protector, the one who'd braid my hair and tell me stories when our parents fought. When she vanished at 17, it was like the world cracked open. No trace, no clues, just an empty bedroom and a town full of rumors. Some said she ran away. Others whispered darker things, kidnapping, murder, or worse. I was 14 then, too young to do anything but cry. Now, at 24, I was here, chasing a ghost. The hallway led to a kitchen, its counters cluttered with rusted cans and shattered glass. A door at the far end stood slightly open, leading to a basement. My stomach twisted. Basements in old houses like this were never good news. I pushed the door open and a wave of cold air hit me. carrying that metallic smell again, stronger now. The stairs creaked as I descended, each step slower than the last. My flashlight beam danced across concrete walls, landing on a single wooden chair in the center of the room. It was empty, but around it, the floor was stained dark, a wide, uneven circle that looked too much like blood. I froze, my breath catching. The stain was old, flaking at the edges, but it felt alive, like it was watching me. I forced myself to move, circling the chair, searching for anything, a clue, a sign. That's when I saw it. Carved into the back of the chair, in jagged, uneven letters, was my name. Sarah. My knees buckled. This wasn't random. Whoever wrote that letter, whoever left that photo, knew I'd come here. They wanted me here. A sound broke the silence, a faint, rhythmic tapping from above like footsteps pacing the floor. My heart slammed against my ribs. I wasn't alone. I backed toward the stairs, gripping my flashlight like a weapon, and climbed as quietly as I could. The tapping stopped as I reached the kitchen, but now there was another sound. A low, keening hum, like someone singing without words. It was coming from the living room. I crept forward, my pulse roaring in my ears. The humming grew louder, almost melodic, but wrong, like a lullaby sung in a nightmare. I peered around the corner. The living room was empty, the sheets still draped over the furniture, but one of them was moving. Not fluttering, not swaying, moving like something beneath it was shifting, breathing. I wanted to run, to bolt back to my car and never look back, but the Polaroid burned in my pocket. Emily. I had to know. I stepped into the room, my flashlight trembling in my hand. "Who's there?" I whispered. The humming stopped. The sheet went still. Then, slowly, it began to rise, sliding off the shape beneath it. My breath caught as the fabric fell away, revealing not a person, but a mirror. It was tall, its frame ornate and blackened with age, and in its reflection, I saw myself. But not just me. Behind me, in the mirror, stood Emily. She looked exactly as she had in the Polaroid, 17 and radiant, her eyes locked on mine. I spun around, but the room was empty. Just me, the furniture, the dust. I turned back to the mirror, and she was still there, closer now, her smile gone. Her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. I leaned in, my breath fogging the glass, and her hand reached out, pressing against the inside of the mirror like it was a window. Her fingers were pale, too long. The nails cracked and yellowed. I stumbled back, my flashlight clattering to the floor. The mirror flickered, like a TV screen losing signal, and Emily's image vanished. In its place was something else, a shape, tall and thin, with limbs that bent at wrong angles. Its face was a blur, a smear of shadow where features should have been. It moved, stepping out of the mirror, its body unfolding into the room. I screamed, scrambling backward, my hands scraping the floor. The thing didn't chase me, it just stood there, its head tilting, like it was studying me. I ran. Up the stairs, down the hall, my feet pounding against the floorboards. The front door was still open, my car just beyond it, but as I reached the foyer, the door slammed shut. I yanked at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew colder, the metallic smell choking now. Behind me, the tapping started again, closer, deliberate, like something was stalking me through the house. I turned, my back against the door, and saw it. The shape from the mirror, standing at the far end of the hall. It didn't move like a person. It glided, its limbs twitching in sharp, unnatural jerks. I bolted up the stairs, my only thought to get away, to find somewhere to hide. The second floor was a maze of doors, all closed, all identical. I picked one at random, throwing it open and slamming it shut behind me. The room was small, a bedroom, with a single window boarded shut. A mattress lay in the corner, stained and sagging, and on it was a pile of papers. I grabbed them, my hands shaking, and saw they were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. "Sarah, you're the only one who can find her. Sarah, she's waiting. Sarah, come to the house." Each one was written in the same ink, the same handwriting as the letter in my pocket. And at the bottom of the pile was another Polaroid, this one showing me, standing in this very room, holding the letters, my face pale with terror. I dropped the papers, my mind reeling. This wasn't possible. I hadn't been here before. A creak came from the hallway, slow and deliberate, like a foot testing the floor. The thing was coming. I pressed myself against the wall, my breath shallow, searching for anything to defend myself. There was nothing. No furniture, no objects, just the mattress and the letters. The door rattled, the handle turning slowly. I held my breath, praying it would pass. The door didn't open. Instead, the humming started again, soft at first, then louder, filling the room. It wasn't coming from the hall. It was coming from the mattress. I stared at it, my heart in my throat as the stains on the fabric began to shift, forming shapes, eyes, a mouth, a face. Emily's face. Her voice came through the humming, clear now, pleading. "Sarah, help me. It won't let me go." I stumbled back, my scream caught in my chest. The mattress was moving, rising as if something inside was pushing its way out. I didn't wait to see what it was. I threw open the door and ran, the hallway stretching impossibly long, the walls closing in. The tapping followed, faster now, matching my steps. I reached the stairs, but they weren't there anymore, just a black void where the staircase should have been. I turned, and the shape was behind me, closer than ever, its blurred face splitting into a grin. "You found her," it said, its voice a hiss that burrowed into my skull. I screamed, falling backward, expecting to plunge into the void. But instead, I hit the floor, hard, cold concrete. I was back in the basement, the chair in front of me, my name carved deeper now, the letters bleeding red. The thing was gone, but the humming was everywhere, vibrating in my bones. The stain on the floor pulsed, spreading toward me like a living thing. I scrambled to my feet, my flashlight gone, the darkness closing in. And then I saw her, Emily, standing in the corner, her eyes empty, her skin gray. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, her voice overlapping with the humming. "It wanted you, not me." The stain reached my feet, cold and wet, climbing my legs like hands. I tried to run, but my body wouldn't move. The last thing I saw was Emily's face, her mouth stretching into that same blurred grin, and the last thing I heard was the humming, swallowing me whole. The fog clung to the ground like a shroud, swallowing the road as I drove toward the old mill. My headlights barely pierced the mist, catching glimpses of twisted trees and the glint of a rusted sign, "Private property. Keep out." I shouldn't have been here. No one came to the mill anymore, not since the fire that gutted it years ago, leaving it a charred skeleton of brick and iron. But the phone call had changed everything. A voice, low and distorted, whispering my name, Laura, and telling me to come. "She's here," it said. "You'll find her at the mill." Then, a click and silence. I didn't know who she was, but the voice stirred something deep, a memory I couldn't place. My sister, Anna, had been gone for 5 years, vanished without a trace after a fight with our parents. The police called her a runaway. I called her missing. The call felt like a thread tied to her, pulling me into the dark. I parked at the mill's gate, my car's engine rattling before it died. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of ash and rot. My flashlight beam trembled as I stepped out, cutting through the fog to reveal the mill's jagged silhouette. Its windows were black, some shattered, others boarded up like sealed eyes. The gate creaked as I pushed it open, the sound swallowed by the stillness. My boots crunched on gravel, then sank into mud as I approached the entrance, a gaping doorway where the door had long since burned away. I clutched the phone in my pocket, the call still echoing in my mind. I whispered, "Anna?" The word felt fragile, like it might break the air. Inside, the mill was a maze of shadows. The air was colder than outside, thick with the smell of charred wood and something sour, like spoiled meat. My flashlight swept across rusted machinery, their shapes looming like hunched figures. The floor was littered with debris, broken glass, singed papers, a child's shoe, its laces frayed. My heart thudded. Anna had been 19 when she disappeared, not a child, but the shoe felt like a warning. I called her name again, louder this time. The echo came back wrong, warped, like someone else's voice answering. I moved deeper, my beam catching glints of metal and ash. The mill had been abandoned after the fire, the one that killed 3 workers and left the town whispering about curses. No one knew what started it, but the stories grew. Lights in the windows at night, screams carried on the wind. I'd never believed them, not until now. The call had been so clear, so certain. She's here. I wanted it to be Anna. Needed it to be her. But doubt gnawed at me. What if this was a trap? What if the voice wasn't human? A staircase led to the upper floors, its steps sagging under layers of ash. I climbed, each creak louder than the last, my breath hitching as the air grew colder. The second floor was a cavern of broken beams and exposed sky, the roof half collapsed. My flashlight caught something in the corner, a pile of clothes, or so I thought, until I stepped closer. It was a sleeping bag, stained and torn, surrounded by empty food cans and a cracked mirror propped against the wall. My reflection stared back, pale and distorted, my eyes too wide. But behind me, in the glass, was another shape. A figure, blurred and tall, its edges bleeding into the dark. I spun around, my flashlight slashing through the air. Nothing, just the sleeping bag, the cans, the mirror. My pulse roared in my ears. I stepped closer to the mirror, my breath fogging its surface. The figure appeared again, closer now, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. I stumbled back, tripping over the sleeping bag, and my flashlight rolled across the floor, its beam spinning wildly. The figure was gone when I looked again, but the mirror wasn't empty. Words were scratched into its surface, faint but clear. Laura, she's waiting. My hands shook as I grabbed the flashlight, my mind screaming to leave. But Anna's face flashed in my memory. Her laugh, her hand squeezing mine when we were kids. If she was here, I couldn't abandon her. I forced myself to move, following a hallway that stretched deeper into the mill. The air grew heavier, the sour smell stronger, until it was almost choking. The hallway ended at a metal door, its surface pitted with rust. I pushed it open and the hinges screamed, revealing a vast room filled with old machinery, looms and presses, their metal teeth gleaming in my light. In the center of the room was a trapdoor, its edges blackened as if burned. My stomach twisted. Trapdoors led to basements, and basements in places like this were never safe. But the voice on the phone echoed in my head. She's here. I knelt, my fingers brushing the trapdoor's handle. It was ice cold, biting my skin. I pulled, and the door groaned open, releasing a gust of air that smelled of decay. A ladder descended into darkness, its rungs slick with something I didn't want to name. I climbed down, my flashlight trembling, the beam barely reaching the bottom. The basement was a concrete tomb, its walls slick with moisture. My light caught something in the center, a chair, bolted to the floor, its wood splintered and stained. Around it, the concrete was marked with scratches, deep and frantic, like someone had clawed at it. My breath caught as I saw the words carved into the chair's back. Laura. My name, etched in jagged lines, as if written by someone in a hurry or in pain. A sound broke the silence, a soft, rhythmic thump, like a heartbeat coming from the shadows. I swung my flashlight, but the beam seemed weaker now, swallowed by the dark. The thumping grew louder, closer, and I backed away, my heels hitting something soft. I looked down. It was a backpack, half open, spilling out clothes. Anna's clothes. Her favorite sweater, the one she wore the day she vanished, was crumpled inside, stained with something dark and sticky. I choked on a sob, clutching the sweater. "Anna!" I screamed, my voice echoing off the walls. The thumping stopped, replaced by a new sound, a low, guttural laugh that seemed to come from everywhere. I spun, my flashlight catching glimpses of movement in the corners, shapes that darted just beyond the light. The air grew colder, the smell of decay overwhelming. I stumbled toward the ladder, but it was gone, the trapdoor now a solid ceiling above me. Panic clawed at my chest. I was trapped. The laugh came again, closer, and I saw it. A figure, tall and thin, its limbs too long, its face a smear of shadow. It didn't walk, it glided, its movements jerky, like a puppet on broken strings. I pressed myself against the wall, the sweater still in my hands, and the figure stopped, its head tilting as if listening. "Laura," it said, its voice the same distorted whisper from the phone. "You found her." I screamed, throwing the sweater at it, and ran, my flashlight flickering. The basement seemed to stretch, the walls shifting, closing in. I tripped, falling hard, and my light went out. Darkness swallowed me, thick and alive, pressing against my skin. The laugh was everywhere now, circling me. And then, silence. I fumbled for my phone, its weak glow my only lifeline. The screen showed a photo I hadn't taken, me standing in the basement, the figure behind me, its hands on my shoulders. I dropped the phone, my scream choking in my throat. Hands grabbed me, cold, impossibly strong, pulling me backward. I fought, kicking, clawing, but the grip tightened and I felt myself being dragged across the floor. The chair loomed in the darkness, its carved letters glowing faintly, like they were alive. I was forced into it, my wrists and ankles bound by something I couldn't see, something that burned like ice. The figure leaned close, its blurred face inches from mine. "She's here," it whispered, and the air split with a new sound. Anna's voice, screaming my name, but not from the figure. It was coming from the floor, from the scratches, from the walls. I thrashed, sobbing, as the figure's hands pressed against my face, its fingers sinking into my skin. "You're her," it said, and the world tilted. When my vision cleared, I was standing, unbound, in the center of the room. The chair was empty, the figure gone. But the scratches on the floor had changed, forming new words. "Laura, you were always here." My hands shook as I touched my face, feeling something wrong. My skin was too cold, too smooth, like it wasn't mine. I looked down at the sweater, still clutched in my hands, and saw it wasn't Anna's. It was mine, the one I'd been wearing when I arrived. The truth hit me like a blade. Anna hadn't disappeared. I had. The call, the mill, the figure. It was all me, pulling myself back, trapped in this place, in this moment. The figure wasn't a monster. It was Anna, trying to save me, trying to make me see. But it was too late. The basement walls pulsed, the scratches bleeding, and I felt myself sinking, becoming part of the mill, my screams joining Anna's, trapped forever in the dark. The road stretched endlessly ahead, swallowed by trees on either side like a narrow vein winding through a slumbering beast. The headlights of the car barely pushed back the darkness, casting long, crooked shadows across the asphalt. Sarah tightened her grip on the steering wheel. She hadn't passed a single car for over an hour. She'd taken a wrong turn, she was sure of it. Her phone had lost signal miles back, and the GPS had gone blank. Now all she could do was keep driving and hope this forest road led somewhere. Something moved in the trees ahead. A flicker, too fast to see. She hit the brakes. The car skidded slightly but came to a stop. Her heart thudded against her ribs. Squinting into the gloom, she saw nothing, just branches whispering in the breeze. A shape darted across the road. Human. She gasped, breath catching in her throat. For a second it was there, a pale figure hunched and fast, then gone. She waited, staring into the woods, but the figure didn't return. Shaking, she drove on. A few minutes later, she saw the sign. Old, wooden, half buried in overgrowth. It read, "Welcome to Cold Pines." The paint was faded, but something about the name chilled her. Cold Pines. The letters looked like they'd been scratched in by nails rather than a brush. She didn't remember seeing this town on any map. Soon the trees gave way to buildings. Dilapidated houses, sagging porches, windows boarded up or shattered. The streetlights flickered weakly, casting sickly yellow halos. She drove slowly now, every instinct screaming that something wasn't right. Then she saw him. A man stood at the edge of the road, his back to her, dressed in old clothes, stiff with grime. He didn't move as she passed, didn't even look, just stood there like he'd been waiting for something, or someone. She drove past a small convenience store, its sign barely legible. The lights inside were on, though the rest of the town looked abandoned. Against her better judgment, she parked and went inside. The bell above the door chimed. The store was clean, too clean. Stocked shelves, glowing fridges, and a man behind the counter with an odd smile. He looked normal, but something about him felt staged, like he'd been placed there. "Evening," he said. His voice was hollow. She hesitated. "Hi, I think I'm lost. My GPS isn't working." He nodded slowly, still smiling. "That happens around here." She glanced around. "Is there a motel or something? Just until I figure out how to get back on track." He paused. "There's one down the road, just past the church. But I'd be careful." "Careful?" He didn't answer, just stared at her, eyes unblinking. She left without buying anything. The motel was exactly where he said it would be. A faded sign, one story, rows of identical doors. The office was locked, but a key hung from a rusty nail beside a ledger. No one in sight. She took a room, number 6. Inside, everything looked old but unused. Dust on the floor, yet the bed was made. The bathroom mirror had a long crack running down it like a wound. She closed the blinds and locked the door. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside made her sit up and listen. Around midnight, she thought she heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate. She crept to the window and peered through a gap in the blinds. There was someone in the parking lot. A man, not moving, just standing and staring at her door. She stepped back, heart hammering. When she looked again, he was gone. Morning brought no relief. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds. She tried the car, dead. Battery fine, gas tank full, but it wouldn't start. She walked to the store again. The same man was there, same smile. "My car won't start," she said. "They never do," he replied. "Can I use a phone?" "There's no phones in Cold Pines." She stared at him. "How do people leave?" His smile faded. "They don't." She backed out slowly. Outside, the town looked worse in daylight. The buildings had a decayed, haunted quality. Doors stood open, revealing dark interiors. Windows seemed to watch her. She decided to walk, follow the road back the way she came. But no matter how far she walked, the trees closed in tighter, the air heavier. After what felt like hours, she came out. Back in Cold Pines, back at the sign, back where she started. Something was wrong with this place. It was like the road curved into itself, trapping her in a loop. She screamed. The motel door was open when she returned. She hadn't left it that way. Inside, the bed was unmade. The mirror shattered completely. On the wall, something was scrawled in red. "You're not alone." She ran outside. People were standing in the street now, silent, staring, their faces blank. Men, women, even children, all watching her. She turned and ran into the woods. Branches tore at her clothes, scraped her arms. She didn't stop. She found a house deep in the trees, ancient, rotting. She forced the door open and stepped inside. Photos lined the walls, black and white portraits of people, all with the same blank expressions. She recognized one, the man from the store. Another photo, her. She stumbled back, her image exactly as she looked now. Same clothes, same expression. A sound behind her, a whisper, barely audible. She turned slowly. A woman stood in the doorway. Her eyes were hollow. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her skin was gray, her fingers long and unnatural. Sarah ran, back into the woods. She tripped and fell, rolled down a slope, and landed hard at the bottom. As she pushed herself up, she realized she was in a clearing. In the center stood a stone altar, weathered, ancient, stained. Around it were markings carved into the earth, symbols she couldn't understand, and something moved behind it. The figure from the road, pale, hunched. It stepped forward into the light. Its eyes were sewn shut. Its mouth hung open, revealing a black void. It moved without sound, drifting. She turned to run, then stopped. Another figure, then another. Dozens, all around the clearing, all watching her without eyes. She screamed again. Darkness swallowed her. She woke back in the motel room. Same cracked mirror, same rusted key on the nightstand. But her clothes were clean. No cuts, no bruises. She ran to the window. The parking lot was empty. She opened the door and stepped outside. Cold Pines was gone. Where buildings once stood, there was only forest. No road, no sign, just trees. She turned around. The motel was gone too. Nothing remained, only the whisper of wind through the pines. She was alone, or so she thought. Behind her, a new path appeared, worn, narrow, leading deeper into the forest. Something compelled her to follow. And as she did, the whispers grew louder, voices calling her name. She didn't remember telling anyone her name. The rain beat against the windows of the old house, a relentless drum that echoed through the empty halls. I stood at the front door, my breath shallow, clutching the key my uncle had left me in his will. The house was mine now, though I'd never set foot in it before. He'd been a recluse, my uncle, and the stories about this place were whispered in my family like ghost tales, half believed, half mocked. The key felt heavy, cold, like it carried the weight of secrets. I turned it in the lock, and the door creaked open, exhaling a musty breath of dust and decay. Inside, the air was thick, the kind of stillness that presses against your skin. The foyer stretched into shadows, lit only by the faint glow of streetlights filtering through the storm. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood, too loud, like the house was listening. I'd come to clear it out, sell it off, and be done with the place. That was the plan. But plans have a way of unraveling when you step into the dark. The living room was a museum of forgotten things. Faded armchairs, a grandfather clock frozen at midnight, and shelves crammed with books that looked untouched for decades. I set my bag down and flicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. A portrait hung above the fireplace, a woman with pale skin and eyes that seemed to follow me. Her smile was wrong, too tight, like she knew something I didn't. I turned away, my skin prickling, and headed for the stairs. The sooner I cataloged this place, the sooner I could leave. The stairs groaned under my weight, each step a protest from the house itself. Upstairs, the hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with closed doors. I chose one at random, its knob stiff under my hand. The room beyond was a bedroom, sparse but tidy, with a single bed and a dresser topped with a cracked mirror. The mirror caught my reflection. But for a split second, I swore it wasn't me staring back. The face was mine, but the eyes, too wide, too dark, like they'd seen something I hadn't. I blinked, and it was gone. Just my tired face looking back. I laughed, a shaky sound, and told myself it was the storm playing tricks. I moved to the dresser, pulling open drawers to find nothing but moth-eaten linens and a faint smell of lavender. The last drawer stuck, and when I yanked it free, something clattered inside. A small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed and edges curling. My uncle's handwriting filled the pages, tight and frantic, words spilling over each other. I flipped to the last entry, my pulse quickening. It's in the house. It never leaves. I thought I could ignore it, but it knows I'm here. It always knows. The words stopped there, abrupt, like he'd been interrupted. My uncle died of a heart attack, they said. Natural causes. But my hands shook as I closed the book. A sound came from downstairs, a soft thud like something heavy hitting the floor. I froze, straining to hear over the rain. Nothing, just the storm, I told myself. But then it came again, deliberate, like a footstep. I shoved the journal into my pocket and crept to the door, flashlight trembling in my grip. The hallway was empty, but the air felt heavier now, like the house was holding its breath. I moved to the stairs, each step slower than the last, my heart pounding in my ears. The living room was as I'd left it, but the portrait above the fireplace seemed different. The woman's smile was gone, her lips pressed into a thin, grim line. I told myself it was my imagination, that old houses creak and groan. But as I crossed the room, the grandfather clock chimed, a deep, hollow toll that vibrated through my bones. It shouldn't have. The hands were still frozen at midnight. I backed away, my flashlight sweeping the room, catching glints of dust in the air. Something moved in the corner of my eye, a shadow that darted behind the couch. I swung the light toward it, but there was nothing, just the empty room, mocking me. I needed to get a grip. I headed for the kitchen, hoping a glass of water would steady me. The kitchen was small, its counters bare except for a single knife lying in the sink, its blade gleaming under my flashlight. I hadn't noticed it before. I reached for a glass, but my hand froze as I heard it again, that thud, closer now from the hallway. I turned, gripping the flashlight like a weapon, and called out, my voice thin and unsteady. "Hello?" The word hung in the air, unanswered, I stepped into the hallway, and that's when I saw it. A footprint in the dust, fresh, bare, and too large to be mine. My breath caught, my mind racing. I hadn't imagined it. Someone was here. I backed toward the front door, my eyes locked on the hallway, but the shadows seemed to shift, curling like smoke. The air grew colder, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays there. I reached for the door, but the knob wouldn't turn. I twisted harder, panic rising, but it was stuck, like the house itself was holding it shut. A low creak came from the stairs, and I spun around, my flashlight catching the edge of something pale moving at the top of the landing. I didn't wait to see what it was. I ran, my footsteps pounding as I bolted for the back door in the kitchen. It was locked too, the bolt rusted and unyielding. I grabbed the knife from the sink, its weight cold and reassuring in my hand. The house was alive with sounds now, creaks, whispers, a faint hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I backed into the living room, my eyes darting to every shadow, every corner. The portrait was watching me again, and this time her eyes were black, empty pits that swallowed the light. I stumbled toward the stairs, my only thought to find another way out. The journal in my pocket felt like a lead weight, its words burning in my mind. It never leaves. What had my uncle seen? What had he known? I reached the top of the stairs, my breath ragged, and froze. The hallway was different now. The doors were open, every single one, and at the end of the hall, a figure stood. It was tall, too tall, its limbs long and twisted, its face hidden in shadow. It didn't move, but I felt its gaze, heavy and unblinking. I turned to run, but the floor beneath me gave way, wood splintering as I fell through into darkness. I landed hard, pain shooting through my legs, my flashlight skittering across the floor. I was in the basement, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and something sour like rot. My flashlight lay just out of reach, its beam illuminating a pile of old furniture and something else. A shape, curled in the corner, human but wrong, its limbs bent at angles that made my stomach lurch. I scrambled for the light, my hands shaking as I grabbed it. The shape didn't move, but I heard it, a low, wet rasp, like it was trying to speak. I swung the beam away, my heart hammering, and saw stairs leading up. I ran, the knife still clutched in my hand, the rasp growing louder behind me. The stairs led to a door, and this one opened, spilling me back into the kitchen. I slammed it shut, my hands fumbling for anything to brace it. The knife slipped from my grip, clattering to the floor, and I didn't stop to pick it up. The house was a maze now, the layout shifting in ways that didn't make sense. Hallways stretched longer than they should. Doors led to rooms I hadn't seen before. I found myself back in the living room, the portrait now smeared with something dark, like blood. The grandfather clock chimed again, louder, faster, a frantic rhythm that matched my pulse. I ran for the front door, praying it would open this time, but as I reached it, the lights flickered on. The house was different. Clean, bright, the furniture new, the air warm. I stood frozen, my mind reeling. A woman's voice called from the kitchen, soft and familiar. "You're home early." I turned, my legs leaden, and saw her, the woman from the portrait, standing at the counter, smiling that same tight smile. She was real, flesh and blood, but her eyes were wrong, too dark, too deep. "Stay for dinner," she said, her voice curling around me like smoke. I backed away, my hand finding the journal in my pocket. I pulled it out, flipping to the last page, and saw new words, written in my own handwriting. "You're part of it now." The room spun, the lights dimming, and the woman's smile widened, her teeth sharp and glinting. The house groaned, the walls closing in, and I realized the truth too late. The house wasn't haunted. It was alive, and I was its guest. Forever. The road stretched on, empty and dark, framed by towering trees that seemed to lean in like silent sentinels. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the mist still clung to the ground, curling along the pavement like fingers reaching for the wheels of the car. Emma gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her knuckles were white. She hadn't seen another car in miles. Her phone had lost signal long before she'd made the last wrong turn, and she was sure now it was the wrong turn. The old GPS had crackled out after guiding her onto a narrow road that didn't appear on the map. It wasn't just unfamiliar, it was wrong. The air was colder here, the sky darker, though the storm had passed. And something about the trees, they weren't right either. Too tall, too still. She spotted a house through the mist, just off the road. It stood alone, surrounded by woods, like it had been forgotten by time. The paint had peeled away from the wooden siding. The windows were dark, but there was a dim light flickering behind the curtains upstairs. A single porch light buzzed faintly. It was the only sign of life she'd seen in hours. Her gas tank was nearly empty. She had no signal, and the nearest town was at least 20 miles behind her. She didn't want to go up to that house. Every part of her screamed to keep driving, but something deeper whispered that if she kept going, she wouldn't make it. She pulled into the gravel driveway. The front steps creaked under her weight. She knocked once, then again, no answer. She called out, still silence. She reached for the doorknob. It turned. The house welcomed her with a groan. Inside, it smelled of damp wood and something else, something faintly metallic. The furniture was old, covered in plastic sheets, as if waiting for someone to come back and remember it. The floorboards under her shoes felt soft with age. "Hello?" she called again. No answer, but the light upstairs was still on. Against all reason, she climbed the staircase. Each step seemed to echo, too loud for the size of the house. She reached the hallway. The door at the end was cracked open. The light was coming from there. She pushed it wider. A small room, a bed with white sheets, an oil lamp flickering on the nightstand. No one inside, except for a mirror. It stood tall against the wall, antique, with a frame of dark wood carved into curling vines. But the glass, it was wrong. Emma stared at it. She was there, her reflection, standing as she was, staring at herself. But behind her, in the reflection, the hallway was not empty. There was a figure there, a man, standing completely still at the top of the stairs. She spun around. Nothing. She looked back into the mirror. He was still there, closer now. She gasped, backing away, but her reflection didn't move. It stared back at her with wide, frightened eyes, but its arms stayed at its sides. It didn't move when she moved, and behind it, the figure in the mirror walked forward. She screamed and turned from the mirror, bolting down the stairs, heart hammering. She didn't stop to look back. She ran out the front door and into the night. But the car was gone. Not just moved, gone. The driveway was empty. No tracks. No sign it had ever been there. Her heart pounded in her throat. She turned toward the road. It was gone too. Where it had been, now there was just forest. Trees in every direction. The mist was thicker now. She could barely see 5 feet in front of her. She turned back toward the house. It was closer than before. Not just in the way things feel when you're panicked. Physically closer. It had moved. Somehow. She backed away. Then she heard it. A voice. Low, male. Speaking slowly, like someone repeating a name they hadn't said in years. Emma. It came from the woods. She turned toward it, but saw nothing. Again, louder. Emma. Then closer. Emma. It was behind her. She ran. Branches whipped at her face. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs threatened to give out and finally collapsed against a fallen tree. Silence. Then she heard water, a creek. She followed the sound, stumbling through brush until she reached it. The water was black in the dim light, but on the other side, she saw it. A light. A window. Another house. Not the same one. This one looked lived in. Warm. She crossed the creek, slipping on the rocks, and approached the cabin. The front door opened before she could knock. A woman stood there, elderly, with kind eyes and a thick shawl around her shoulders. "You made it," she said. Emma hesitated. "What?" The woman stepped aside. "Come inside, child. You're not safe out here." Emma entered, and warmth rushed over her like a wave. A fire crackled in the hearth. The air smelled of herbs and old paper. The woman handed her a towel. "You shouldn't have gone near that house." Emma stared. "You know about it?" The woman nodded. "We all do. Most pretend it isn't there. Easier that way. But sometimes, someone sees it. Usually the lost ones. The ones who take a wrong turn." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "What is it?" The woman looked at her for a long time. Then she said, "It's a place that remembers. A place that waits." Emma didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the cabin made her heart lurch. But when morning finally came, the woman was gone. The fire was cold, and outside the forest was different. No mist, no wrongness. Her car was parked beside the cabin. She got in and drove. The road was back. The GPS lit up. The town was only a few miles away. She told herself it was over. But when she stopped for gas later that day, the cashier gave her a strange look. "You okay?" he asked. "You've got something on your neck." She went to the restroom and looked in the mirror. There, on her neck, just under the skin, was a faint outline, like a fingerprint, pressed into her flesh. That night she dreamed of the mirror, and her reflection did not sleep. Weeks passed. Emma tried to forget, but the dreams got worse. The figure in the mirror got closer, and always her reflection stayed behind. One night she woke to find her bedroom mirror fogged from the inside, letters written in the condensation. "Help me." She covered it with a blanket, but the next night the message changed. Too late. One morning, she didn't recognize herself. The face in the mirror looked like hers, but subtly wrong. The eyes too wide, the mouth slightly crooked. It smiled when she didn't. She tried to break the mirror. The glass shattered, but the reflection stayed intact. She moved to a new apartment. The mirror came with her. She never brought it. She burned it once. The next day, it was leaning against her bedroom wall. The man in the mirror started appearing behind her again. First just a shadow, then a shape, then a face. Always behind her, never in the room, only in the glass. She stopped looking in mirrors. But one night, she woke to find her phone screen lit up. Selfie mode, the camera on. And in the reflection, someone stood behind her. She turned. No one. The screen cracked in her hand. The next morning, every reflective surface in her apartment, every window, every spoon, every piece of glass showed the same thing. A woman, trapped behind the surface, screaming silently. Her, not the her standing there. The other one, the one who never left that house, the one who stayed in the mirror. Now Emma doesn't sleep. She can't. If she does, she wakes up somewhere else. Some nights, in her dreams, she's standing in that old hallway again, looking into the mirror, watching herself walk away, and knowing, deep down, that it's not her in the world anymore. It's something else. Something that got out, and something that left her behind. The wind howled through the barren trees, clawing at the old cabin like a predator desperate to get inside. I stood at the edge of the porch, my breath fogging in the frigid air, staring into the endless stretch of forest that swallowed the horizon. The others were inside, their voices a faint murmur behind the creaking wooden walls. We'd come here for a weekend getaway, a chance to escape the grind of city life. Me, Sarah, Tom, and Lisa. Just 4 friends, a rented cabin, and a plan to drink, laugh, and forget the world. But something about this place felt wrong from the moment we arrived. The air was too heavy, the shadows too sharp. And now, as night fell, the forest seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I shook off the unease and stepped back inside. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering light across the room. Sarah was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, though there was no signal out here. Tom was in the kitchen, rummaging through the cooler for another beer, while Lisa sat cross-legged on the floor, shuffling a deck of cards. "You guys feel that?" I asked, rubbing my arms. "It's like the temperature dropped 10 degrees out there." Lisa glanced up, her eyes glinting in the firelight. "It's just the wind. This place is ancient, probably full of drafts." She dealt the cards with a practiced flick of her wrist, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Tom grunted, cracking open a can, and Sarah didn't even look up. I wanted to press the issue, to tell them about the strange feeling crawling up my spine, but I let it go. Maybe it was just the isolation playing tricks on me. We played cards for a while, the conversation light, but strained. Every so often, a gust of wind would rattle the windows, and we'd all pause, listening to the cabin groan. It was during one of those silences that we heard it, a low guttural sound, like a growl coming from outside. My heart stuttered. "What was that?" I whispered. Tom laughed, but it sounded forced. "Probably just a branch scraping the roof. You're jumping at shadows, man." He took a swig of his beer, but his eyes darted toward the window. Sarah set her phone down, her face pale. Lisa didn't move, her hands frozen on the cards. "Let's check it out," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Tom shrugged, playing it cool, but he grabbed a flashlight from the counter. Sarah hesitated, then followed, and Lisa trailed behind, her steps slow and deliberate. We stepped onto the porch, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness. The forest was a wall of black, the trees swaying like they were alive. The growl came again, closer this time, and it wasn't a branch. It was deep, animalistic, and it made the hairs on my neck stand up. "There," Sarah whispered, pointing to the tree line. I followed her gaze and saw it, a pair of glowing eyes low to the ground, staring right at us. The flashlight beam caught them, and they didn't blink. They just watched, unyielding, until the light flickered and died. Tom cursed, shaking the flashlight, but it wouldn't turn back on. The eyes vanished, and the silence that followed was worse than the growl. "Let's get back inside," Lisa said, her voice barely audible. We didn't argue. We piled back into the cabin, locking the door behind us. The air inside felt stale, oppressive, like the walls were closing in. "It was just a wolf or something," Tom said, but he didn't sound convinced. Sarah hugged her knees to her chest, her eyes wide. Lisa was staring at the door, her face unreadable. I tried to lighten the mood, suggesting we keep playing cards, but no one was interested. The fire was dying, and the room grew colder. Then we heard it again. Not a growl this time, but a scratch. Slow, deliberate, like nails dragging across the wood outside. It started at the door, then moved to the walls, circling the cabin. My pulse hammered in my ears. "What the hell is that?" I said, my voice cracking. Lisa stood up, her movements jerky, like a puppet on strings. "I'll check the windows," she said, her tone flat. Before anyone could stop her, she crossed the room and peered through the glass. For a moment she was still, then she gasped and stumbled back. "There's something out there," she whispered. It's not an animal." "What do you mean?" Sarah's voice was shrill. Lisa didn't answer, just pointed at the window. I forced myself to look. At first I saw nothing but darkness. Then, just beyond the glass, I caught a glimpse of movement, something tall, humanoid, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its movements too jerky, like it was mimicking a person but didn't know how. It was gone before I could focus, melting into the shadows. "We need to leave," Sarah said, grabbing her coat. "Right now." "We can't," Tom snapped. "The car's a mile down the road and it's pitch black out there. Whatever that thing is, it's waiting for us." He was right, and the realization hit like a punch. We were trapped. The scratching stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed against my eardrums. We sat in a huddle by the fire, no one speaking, just listening. Then, from upstairs, there was a thud. Heavy, deliberate, like something had landed on the roof. Sarah whimpered, and Tom gripped the fireplace poker like a weapon. Lisa's eyes were fixed on the ceiling, tracking the sound as it moved, thud, 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 toward the chimney. The fire sputtered, and a cloud of ash billowed into the room. I coughed, my eyes stinging, and when the air cleared, I saw it. A hand, pale and claw-like, reaching down from the chimney. It wasn't human. The fingers were too long, the skin too taut, like it had been stretched over bone. Sarah screamed, and Tom swung the poker, but the hand retreated, leaving only a faint trail of soot. "We need to block the chimney," I said, my voice shaking. We dragged a heavy table across the room and shoved it against the fireplace, but it felt futile. The thing was already inside the cabin's walls, its presence seeping into every crevice. The air grew colder, the shadows darker, and I could feel it watching us. Lisa was the first to break. "This is my fault," she whispered, her voice trembling. We all turned to her, confused. "I found this place online," she continued, her eyes glassy. "The listing said it was haunted, but I thought it was just a gimmick, a stupid story to make it seem exciting. But there were reviews. People saying they saw things, heard things. I didn't believe them." "Why didn't you tell us?" Sarah shouted, her face twisted with fear and betrayal. "I thought it was a joke," Lisa cried. "I didn't think it was real." Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. The fire was our only light now, its weak glow barely reaching the edges of the room. The scratching started again, faster this time, like a frenzy. It was everywhere. Walls, windows, ceiling. I grabbed a kitchen knife, my hands slick with sweat. Tom clutched the poker, and Sarah clung to my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Then the door rattled. Not a knock, but a violent shaking, like something was trying to tear it off its hinges. We backed away, huddling near the fire. The rattling stopped, and for a moment I thought it was over. Then the door flew open, slamming against the wall with a deafening crash. Cold air rushed in, and with it, the thing. It stood in the doorway, tall and gaunt, its body a mockery of human form. Its face was a blur, like my eyes couldn't focus on it, but its presence was suffocating. It didn't move, just stood there watching us. Sarah screamed, and Tom lunged, swinging the poker. The thing didn't flinch. It raised a hand, and Tom froze, his eyes wide with terror. He dropped the poker and clutched his chest, gasping, then collapsed, motionless. "Tom!" I shouted, but he didn't respond. Sarah was sobbing, and Lisa was muttering something under her breath, her eyes fixed on the thing. I raised the knife, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The thing tilted its head, like it was curious, and took a step forward. The floorboards groaned under its weight, and the air grew so cold it burned my lungs. Lisa stood up, her movements slow and deliberate, like she was in a trance. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and before I could stop her, she walked toward the thing. It reached out, its long fingers brushing her face, and she screamed, a sound so raw it made my blood run cold. Then she was gone, pulled into the darkness beyond the door. Sarah and I were alone now, the thing still watching us. I grabbed her hand and ran for the back door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. We stumbled into the night, the forest closing in around us. The thing didn't follow, but I could feel it, its presence lingering in the air. We ran blindly, branches tearing at our skin, until we reached the car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands numb, and we sped away, the cabin disappearing into the trees. We didn't speak until we reached the city, the lights a stark contrast to the darkness we'd left behind. Sarah was shaking, her eyes hollow. "What was it?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. The police went to the cabin the next day, but they found nothing. No Tom, no Lisa, no sign of the thing. The cabin was empty, the fire cold, the door still locked from the inside. They said we must have imagined it, that our friends had wandered off and gotten lost. But I know what I saw. And at night, when the wind howls, I can still hear the scratching, feel its eyes on me, waiting. They say the forest behind the old mill never gives back what it takes. People used to joke about it in town, especially at the diner over bitter coffee and half-eaten pie. But no one ever walked into those woods alone. Not anymore. There was something wrong with that place, something people didn't talk about directly. You could see it in their eyes when the subject came up, how they shifted in their seats, how they glanced at the floor, how their voices dropped without meaning to. It was as if even saying too much might draw something out. Elena didn't grow up here. She was new to the town, drawn in by the quiet and cheap rent, thinking she'd finally get a chance to finish the book she'd been working on for years. She moved into the weathered house just beyond the edge of town, a place with too many windows and a chimney that hadn't worked in a decade. It was the kind of house where the walls held their breath and the floorboards remembered. The locals were polite enough but always distant, and every time she mentioned her house they'd pause, just a second too long. Then they'd smile too quickly and change the subject. The first time she heard it was just after midnight, a faint knocking, not at her door, not on any wall. It came from beneath the floor. 3 knocks. Slow, measured, as if someone or something was waiting between each one, listening. She told herself it was the pipes or the house settling. Old places made noises. That was normal. But the second night, the knocks came again. Same rhythm, same silence between them. Always 3. By the third night, Elena had started sleeping with a light on. She didn't tell anyone. Not because she thought they'd think she was crazy. No, it was the way the people looked when she mentioned the house, as if they already knew something. She searched the basement. Nothing. Just dust, cobwebs, and a crawl space too narrow for anyone to fit in. But that's where the sound came from. She tried ignoring it. That worked for one night. On the 5th night, she woke to scratching. Not beneath her, but inside the walls. It moved, skittering quickly behind her headboard, racing across to the corner, then silence. Then the knocking again. 3 beats. Not beneath the floor this time, but at her bedroom door. She waited, listened, nothing. When she finally got the courage to open it, there was no one there. But the hallway light had gone out, and at the end of the corridor, just at the edge of the darkness, she thought she saw something. A shape. Tall. Still. She blinked, and it was gone. The next day, she drove into town, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling on the wheel. At the diner, she sat at the counter and ordered coffee. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with thinning hair and a faded apron, studied her carefully. "You've been hearing it, haven't you?" she asked. Elena didn't answer at first. The knocking, always in threes, that's how it starts. Elena's heart dropped. "You should leave," the woman said. "Most don't make it to the 7th night." "What happens on the 7th? But the woman just shook her head. "I never said I knew. I only ever heard of one man who made it that far. He stopped speaking altogether." Elena left the diner without finishing her coffee. That night, she put salt across every threshold, every windowsill. She lit candles and played music loud enough to drown out any sound. Still, she heard it, just past 3 in the morning, knocking. Not just from the floor or the door, but from every direction at once. As if the walls themselves were alive. As if something was circling her, pressing against the edges of her world. She didn't sleep. By the 6th day, she looked like a ghost. Skin pale, lips dry, hands trembling. She went to the town library, desperate for answers. In the oldest section, tucked behind dusty shelves, she found a single journal, worn leather cover, no title. Inside were entries from someone who'd lived in her house long ago. They'd heard the knocking too. They'd seen the shape. And they'd found something beneath the house. A hatch, hidden beneath the crawl space. One no one should ever open. But of course they had. The last entry was smeared with something dark. It ended mid-sentence. "It wants me to see it. It says if I look, I'll understand." Elena went home, journal clutched to her chest. She didn't want to look. But the knocking wouldn't stop. That night, it didn't wait until midnight. It started as soon as the sun dipped below the trees. Louder, angrier, like fists pounding, not knuckles. Every light in the house flickered, then died. She lit a candle, just one. Its flame bent sideways as if recoiling from something. Then she heard the whispering. Not words, just sounds, right at the edge of comprehension, like breath down her neck. She turned, but nothing was there. Elena didn't sleep, and then came the 7th night. It was quiet at first, unnaturally so. Not even the trees moved. No wind, no insects, no sound at all. Then the front door opened on its own. Just a creak, just wide enough. She should have run, but she didn't. The silence pulled her forward. She found herself in the basement without remembering how she got there. The candle flickered out. Then she saw it. The hatch. It hadn't been there before. A square of old wood sunk into the cement floor. No lock, just a ring of rusted iron. And she knew this was what it wanted. She told herself she wouldn't open it, but her hand reached out anyway. As she lifted the hatch, the smell hit her. Like soil and rot. Like something dead had been buried beneath the house for centuries. She lowered a flashlight into the darkness. The beam hit something below. A face, pale, eyes black and empty, but not still. Its mouth was moving. No sound, just the shape of words. "I see you." Elena dropped the light, and in that instant something grabbed her wrist, pulled. She screamed and kicked and somehow broke free, slamming the hatch shut and throwing herself against the wall. The knocking started again, louder than ever. From beneath her, from behind her, from inside her own head. 3 knocks, and again, and again. When morning came, she was still in the basement, curled up and shaking. The hatch was gone, as if it had never been there. But the knocking hadn't stopped. Only now it followed her, into town, into dreams, into the silence between breaths. She tried to leave, packed her car, drove until she saw the highway. But every turn she took led her back. Back to the house, back to the forest, back to the knocking. The people in town stopped speaking to her, not out of malice but fear, as if they'd already written her off, as if they knew how the story ends. Elena still walks the edge of the woods sometimes, staring into the trees. She talks to herself now, whispers, like she's answering something. The lights in her house stay on all night, but no one sees her in the windows. And if you walk past, late at night, When the wind is still and the moon is hidden, you might hear it too. 3 knocks, then silence, then a voice in the dark. I see you, and if you answered, it might see you too. It started with footsteps in the snow. I live alone, in a small house just outside town. Not completely isolated, but far enough that silence is normal, peaceful even. But a few nights ago, I heard footsteps behind the house, crunching, slow, deliberate. They came from the woods that edge my backyard. At first, I thought it might be deer. We get those sometimes. But deer don't walk in straight lines, and they don't stop and stand still. They don't watch you. I turned off the porch light, trying to see better through the window. Nothing moved. The motion sensor didn't trigger. But I swear, just beyond the tree line, something was standing there. I told myself it was nothing. Tired eyes, a trick of the dark. But the next morning, I found footprints in the snow. Bare feet, human. Long toes, deep impressions, as if the person had stood there for a long time. They stopped 10 feet from my porch and vanished. That was the first night. The next evening, I tried to forget. Made tea, read a book, kept the lights on. But just after midnight, I heard it again. Not footsteps this time. Knocking, 3 slow knocks on the back wall of the house. Not the door, the wall. Like someone was testing it. With their knuckles. I froze. The lights were on. If someone was outside, they could see me clearly through the windows. I shut everything off. Heart pounding, I crept to the back door. I didn't open it. Didn't even touch the handle. I pressed my ear to the wood and held my breath. Nothing. Then, a scrape. Long, slow, like a nail tracing the edge of the frame. I backed away and called the police. They showed up 20 minutes later. Checked the area, walked the woods. Found nothing. No tracks. No signs of entry. Probably a prank, one of them said. Kids. But no kid walks barefoot in the snow. And none of them knock on walls. That night I barely slept. Every creak sounded wrong. Every gust of wind felt like it was carrying something with it. I locked my bedroom door. I never used to. But something about that night. At around 2 a.m., I heard another knock. Not from the wall. This time it came from the window. The bedroom window, on the 2nd floor, just a single tap. Soft, measured, like a request. I didn't move. I just stared at the curtains, waiting to see a shadow press against the glass. But nothing came. Eventually, morning did, and when I stepped outside, I saw them. Handprints in the snow, pressed into the ground beneath the window. Fingers splayed, deep, anchored, like someone had tried to climb up. I didn't call the cops again. What would I even say? Instead, I went to town and bought cameras. Motion lights, floods, sensors, the works. All day, I set them up. Every angle covered. No blind spots. That night, I stayed up watching the feeds. Hours passed, nothing. But just after midnight, one of the motion lights triggered. Backyard, the monitor flickered. And for just a moment, I saw it, a shape. Tall, thin, wrong. It stood just beyond the trees. Motionless. Its limbs too long. Its posture too relaxed. Like it was wearing the idea of a person. Then the feed cut out. I ran to the back door, opened it, shined my flashlight into the dark. Nothing, no prints, no movement. I replayed the video, but that frame was gone, as if the system skipped over it. The next morning, I walked into the woods. I know, bad idea, but I needed to see. I followed the edge of the property, scanning for broken branches or footprints. What I found instead was worse. A trail, 2 feet wide, winding through the trees. Not made by feet, not boot prints. It looked like something had dragged itself. Smooth grooves, no steps. The trail led to a clearing, perfectly still, dead quiet, and in the center, a mound, not natural, like something was buried underneath. I didn't touch it, didn't cross into the clearing. I turned around and walked home, fast, and all the way back, I felt watched. That night I packed a bag, told myself I'd leave in the morning, but something inside me knew I should have left already. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound inside the house, soft, shuffling, like bare feet on wood. I grabbed my phone and crawled into the bedroom closet, left the door cracked, just enough to see. The hallway was dark. Then, a shape passed by, too tall, arms too long, neck tilted slightly, like it didn't know how to balance. It stopped, right outside the bedroom door, tilted its head again, and moved on. I stayed in that closet until the sun came up. When I finally stepped out, the front door was wide open. I tried to leave, but my car wouldn't start. Engine was fine, battery full. It just wouldn't turn over. I tried calling for a tow. No signal. Landline was dead, internet down, everything cut. Then the scratching started. In the walls, first a faint rustle, then nails dragging. Too close, too inside. I punched a hole in the drywall. Nothing. No pests, no wires, just emptiness. But the scratching? It moved to another room. That night I sat in the kitchen, flashlight in hand, every camera feed open. At 4:13 a.m., the power died. Every light, every screen. Out, then footsteps. Inside, wet, bare footsteps, coming from the front door. I turned on the flashlight and saw the prints, leading across the floor to the basement stairs. I followed them. I wish I hadn't. At the top of the stairs, I stopped. It was cold, still. Then, a voice from below, whispering, familiar. It was my voice, repeating the same line over and over. I shouldn't have gone into the woods. I slammed the door shut. Ran. Didn't grab anything. Just ran barefoot through the cold. 10 miles down the road, I reached a gas station. Called for help. A deputy went to check the house. When he came back, his face was pale. Said he didn't find anyone. But in the basement, etched into the concrete floor, were 2 words, "Welcome home." I never went back. The house is still there. So are the woods. But sometimes, late at night, I hear a knock. Just one, even when I'm far from home. Like it followed me. Or maybe, like I never really left. It began with a call no one expected. The kind of call that comes in the middle of the night, when the air is still and heavy, and your body hasn't yet shaken off the fog of sleep. When Rachel answered, her voice was dry and uncertain. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end at first, and then a faint breath. "Come home," the voice whispered. Rachel blinked, sat up, heart thudding. "Who is this?" she asked. No answer, just static, and the line went dead. She stared at her phone. The old wallpaper of her childhood home still the background. She hadn't been there in years, not since her parents died and the house had sat abandoned, crumbling in the forest just outside town. But something about the voice pulled at her. It hadn't sounded like a stranger. It sounded like her mother. The next morning she drove. The road twisted through the trees like a dark vein, overgrown and cracked, nearly reclaimed by nature. The house stood like a forgotten monument, weather-worn and sullen, staring down at her from behind a tangle of branches. Windows were smeared with grime, the door slightly ajar as if it had been waiting for her. Rachel hesitated, but then she stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Damp wood, mildew, and something else she couldn't name. The hallway creaked beneath her feet. Dust rose in the air like spirits disturbed. Everything was exactly as it had been. Her father's recliner still faced the fireplace, her mother's favorite porcelain dolls lined up on the mantel, their tiny glass eyes glinting in the low light. She felt watched, not just watched, recognized. That night, the temperature dropped suddenly, and the house groaned under its own weight. Rachel lit a fire, curled under a blanket on the couch, and stared at the shadows shifting along the walls. Just as her eyes began to close, she heard it, a soft thump from upstairs. She froze. Another thump, then another. Footsteps. She got up slowly, heart in her throat. Each step on the staircase seemed louder than the last. As she reached the top, the sound stopped. All the doors were closed, except one. Her old bedroom. She stepped inside. The wallpaper peeled in long curls, and the smell of rot was stronger here. On the bed lay a single photograph, face down. She picked it up. It was a picture of her, but not from any memory she could recall. In it, she was older, exactly as she looked now, but she was standing inside the house. And in the photo, behind her, was her mother. Only her mother had been dead for years. She dropped the picture. Her hands were shaking. Suddenly the lights flickered and went out. The door slammed shut behind her. Rachel screamed and banged on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Then, just as suddenly, the lights flickered back on. The door creaked open. No one was there. She left the room and ran back downstairs. The fireplace was cold, even though the logs still glowed faintly red. Her blanket was gone. The dolls on the mantel were no longer facing forward. They were all turned toward her. That night she didn't sleep. The next morning she found scratches on the inside of her bedroom door. Thin, deliberate lines spelling out one word: stay. Over the next few days, the house changed. She heard whispers behind the walls, a radio playing somewhere deep inside the house, even though none were plugged in. Every mirror in the house began fogging on its own, and on each one, a message would slowly appear, always the same. We are still here. Rachel tried to leave. She packed her things, walked out the front door, but the forest wouldn't let her go. Every path turned her back to the house. Her phone stopped working. The sun never seemed to move in the sky. On the 4th day, she found a diary in her parents' bedroom. It wasn't her mother's, it was her own, pages written in her handwriting, but she had no memory of ever writing them. One entry read, "They don't want me to leave. They say I already belong to them. I see them in the walls. I hear them in my dreams. She turned the page. I've been here before. Another. I never left. Rachel dropped the book. The truth pressed in on her like a closing fist. She staggered to the mirror. Her reflection was smiling. She was not. Something was using her image. Something was inside this house, pretending. She ran back to the living room, only to find the furniture rearranged. A dining table stood in the center now, covered in old photographs of her. Each picture showed her doing things she'd never done, sitting with her parents weeks after they'd died, standing in the woods at night, watching the house burn in the background. She backed away. A whisper snaked into her ear. "You let us in." "No," she breathed. "I didn't." "You did when you answered the call." Suddenly, the front door blew open and the wind howled through the house. The photographs rose into the air like leaves in a storm, swirling faster and faster around her until they burst into flames midair, vanishing to ash. The house shook violently. Lights shattered. The fireplace roared to life with blue fire. And from the hallway, her mother walked in. Only it wasn't her mother anymore. Her eyes were too black, her smile too wide, her feet hovered inches above the floor. She reached out. "You missed us, didn't you?" Rachel screamed and ran, but every hallway twisted into another. Doors led to the same room over and over again. Her bedroom. Over and over again. Eventually, she stopped trying. When she awoke next, she was in her bed. Morning light filtered through the window. Birds chirped outside. The air was still, clean. Had it all been a nightmare? She got up, walked to the bathroom, and looked in the mirror. Her reflection stared back. Then it blinked. She hadn't. The reflection smiled. "You're finally ready," it said. The mirror cracked and she collapsed. When she came to, she was lying on the floor, but everything felt wrong. Her limbs felt heavy. Her breath echoed in her ears. She stood slowly and the mirror showed nothing, no reflection. Rachel tried to scream, but no sound came. She tried to run, but her feet didn't respond. Her eyes, unwillingly, turned to the window, and she saw herself standing outside, smiling, watching. The house had taken her. Or maybe she had always been part of it, and now she watches too, waiting for the next call to be answered. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of the old apartment I'd just moved into. The place was a steal, cheap rent, spacious rooms, and a view of the city's edge where the lights faded into the dark. But from the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. The air was heavy, like it was holding its breath, and the shadows seemed to cling to the corners a little too tightly. I told myself it was just the stress of moving, the strangeness of a new place. I set my boxes down in the living room, the floorboards creaking under my weight, and tried to ignore the faint smell of damp earth that lingered, even though the apartment was on the 5th floor. I was alone, or so I thought. The previous tenant had left in a hurry, abandoning furniture and a few personal items, a cracked mirror, a worn chair, a stack of faded photographs in a drawer. The landlord said the guy had vanished without notice, leaving no forwarding address. I didn't think much of it at the time. People move on. But as I unpacked, the quiet grew oppressive, broken only by the occasional groan of the building settling. I plugged in a lamp, its weak light barely pushing back the gloom, and started arranging my things. That's when I heard it, a faint tapping, like fingernails on glass, coming from the bedroom. I froze, my heart kicking up a notch. The tapping stopped, then started again, slow and deliberate. I grabbed a kitchen knife from my box of utensils, feeling foolish but needing something solid in my hand. The hallway to the bedroom was narrow, the wallpaper peeling in strips, and the air grew colder as I approached. The door was ajar, though I was sure I'd closed it earlier. I pushed it open, knife raised, and scanned the room. Empty. Just my unmade bed, a dresser, and the single window looking out into the storm. The tapping had stopped, but my skin prickled, like someone was watching me from just out of sight. I checked the window. Locked. The glass was fogged with rain, but nothing was out there except the dark. I laughed, a shaky sound, and told myself it was the storm playing tricks. But as I turned away, the mirror on the dresser caught my eye. My reflection looked wrong. My face was pale, my eyes too wide, and for a split second, I swore there was another shape behind me, tall, blurred, like a smudge of shadow. I spun around, heart pounding, but the room was still empty. I covered the mirror with a shirt, my hands trembling, and backed out of the room. Back in the living room, I tried to focus on unpacking, but the unease wouldn't leave me. The tapping started again, this time from the ceiling, directly above me. I looked up, my breath catching. The sound moved, skittering across the ceiling like footsteps, too light to be human. I told myself it was rats, or maybe pipes, but the rhythm was too precise, too intentional. I grabbed my phone to call the landlord, but the screen flickered and the battery drained from full to dead in seconds. The lamp dimmed, then surged, casting wild shadows across the walls. I stood, clutching the knife, and called out, "Who's there?" My voice echoed, unanswered. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low hum, like a voice murmuring just below the edge of hearing. It was coming from the bedroom again. I didn't want to go back, but I couldn't stay still, not with that sound crawling under my skin. I crept down the hallway, the hum growing louder, more distinct, until I could almost make out words. The bedroom door was wide open now, and the shirt I'd draped over the mirror was on the floor. The mirror's surface was dark, like it was swallowing the light, and in its reflection, I saw something move, a figure, not me, standing in the corner of the room. I turned, knife raised, but the corner was empty. The hum stopped, and the silence was worse, thick and suffocating. I approached the mirror, my reflection staring back, but there was something off about my eyes. They weren't mine. They were too dark, too still, like they belonged to someone else. I backed away, my heart hammering, and tripped over something on the floor. It was one of the photographs from the drawer, face up, showing a man I didn't recognize. He was standing in this apartment, in this exact room, staring directly at the camera with those same dark, lifeless eyes. I scrambled to my feet, the photograph clutched in my hand. The hum started again, louder, coming from all around me now. The walls seemed to pulse, the air growing heavy with that damp, earthy smell. I ran to the living room, slamming the bedroom door behind me, and shoved the couch against it. The hum followed, seeping through the walls, and the tapping resumed, faster now, like a dozen hands drumming against the ceiling. I grabbed the stack of photographs from the drawer, hoping for some clue, some explanation. They were all of the same man, in different parts of the apartment, his expression unchanging, his eyes always locked on the camera. The last photo was different. It showed the man standing in the hallway, but behind him was another figure, tall, blurred, just like the shape I'd seen in the mirror. The hum turned into a whisper, clear now, repeating a single phrase. "You see me." My breath hitched, and I dropped the photos, the knife clattering to the floor. The lamp flickered again, and in the brief darkness, I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, coming from the hallway. The couch scraped against the floor, inching forward as something pushed against the door. I grabbed my keys and ran for the front door, but it wouldn't open. The lock turned, the handle moved, but the door stayed shut, like something was holding it from the other side. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, a chorus of voices now, all saying, "You see me?" I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but the sound was swallowed by the apartment like it was eating my voice. The couch slid forward again, and the bedroom door creaked open. I turned, pressing my back against the front door, and saw it. The figure from the mirror, standing in the hallway. It was tall, its limbs too long, its face a shifting blur of shadows. It didn't move, just stood there, watching me. I slid to the floor, my mind racing for a way out. The photographs were scattered around me, and I noticed something I hadn't before. Each one had a faint mark in the corner, a symbol that looked like the ones I'd seen in the mirror's reflection. I grabbed the knife and crawled to the nearest wall, scraping at the peeling wallpaper. Beneath it were more symbols, carved into the plaster, glowing faintly in the dim light. The figure took a step closer, its movements jerky, like a puppet on strings. The whispers were deafening now, filling my head, and I felt a cold hand brush against my neck. I stabbed at the wall, desperate, and the symbols flared brighter. The figure hissed, a sound like static, and the whispers faltered. I kept scraping, tearing away the wallpaper, revealing a pattern of symbols covering the entire wall. The figure lunged, its blurred face inches from mine, but I drove the knife into the wall, and the symbols pulsed with light. The figure screamed, a sound that made my ears ring, and vanished. The whispers stopped. The air grew still, and the lamp flickered back to life. I sat there, panting, the knife still in my hand. The front door clicked open behind me, and I stumbled out into the hallway, not looking back. I ran down the stairs, out into the storm, and didn't stop until I was miles away, soaked and shivering in a gas station parking lot. I never went back to the apartment. I left everything. My boxes, my clothes, my life. But I kept the photographs, though I don't know why. Maybe I needed proof it was real. Weeks later, I rented a new place, far from the city. I thought I'd escaped, but one night, as I unpacked, I found a new photograph among my things, one I hadn't taken. It showed me, standing in my new apartment, staring at the camera with those same dark, lifeless eyes. And behind me, in the corner, was the blurred figure, closer now, its hand resting on my shoulder. The air grew heavy again, and from somewhere in the room, I heard it, a faint tapping, like fingernails on glass. They moved into the house on a gray afternoon, the kind where the clouds seemed to hang too low, pressing down on the rooftops and whispering through the trees. The family was small, a mother, her teenage daughter, and a younger son. It was meant to be a fresh start, a new chapter, but from the moment they stepped inside, something felt off. The air was too still. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was watching. The house was old, but not ancient. A modest two-story tucked away at the edge of a sleepy street, flanked by dense woods that reached far beyond the backyard. It had stood empty for years, though the real estate agent offered no reason. Just one of those places, she had said. Sometimes people just forget a house. It didn't sit right with the mother, but the price had been too good to question, too low to ignore. Boxes were barely unpacked before things began to happen. It started small, lights flickering, a cold draft without a source. The daughter heard footsteps at night when everyone else was asleep. The boy said he saw someone in the hallway mirror. Not a reflection. Someone behind him, standing still, watching. The mother brushed it off. New surroundings, overactive imaginations. But deep down, she felt it too. A heaviness, like walking underwater. At first, she told herself it was grief, still raw from the divorce, from everything they'd lost. But grief didn't scratch the walls at night. Grief didn't whisper her name in the dark. On the third night, the daughter found the attic door open. They hadn't even realized there was an attic. There was no pull cord, no visible hatch, just a square outline in the hallway ceiling that hadn't been there before. A ladder extended down like it had always been part of the house. It groaned under her weight as she climbed. She only wanted to peek, but what she saw made her freeze halfway up. Someone or something was sitting in the far corner, perfectly still, almost blending into the shadows. The air was thick, humming with a sound just outside of hearing. The figure slowly turned its head toward her, revealing eyes too wide and too empty. She screamed, fell, and twisted her ankle. By the time her mother got there, the attic was gone. The ceiling was flat, seamless, no hatch, no ladder. They took her to the hospital. The doctor said she was lucky, but her eyes told a different story. She wouldn't speak about what she saw, only whispered at night over and over. It knows we see it now. The mother tried to stay strong. She chalked it up to trauma, stress. But even she couldn't explain the blood-stained wallpaper that appeared in the boy's room, or why the faucets sometimes ran black instead of water. She reached out to a local historian, hoping to find some record of what this house had been. But there was nothing. No records, no blueprints. The house had simply appeared on the books 10 years ago. Before that, nothing. That night, the boy went missing. He had gone to bed like normal. The mother checked on him around midnight. He was sleeping peacefully. But in the morning, his bed was empty, the sheets still warm. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken locks. The only clue was a trail of small, wet footprints leading from his room to the basement door. She hadn't opened the basement yet. There had been no reason. It was always locked. She assumed it was storage or utilities. But now, trembling, she found the door wide open, darkness yawning inside like a mouth. The light switch didn't work. She called his name. No answer, just the echo of her own breath bouncing off the unseen walls. She stepped inside. The stairs creaked with each step, old wood groaning like it had secrets. The air grew colder the deeper she went. The darkness swallowed her, pulling her down into its throat. She fumbled for her phone, used the flashlight. It barely cut through the black, as if the shadows were absorbing the light. And then she saw it. Not her son, but the basement was covered in drawings, hundreds of them, scratched into the walls, carved deep with fingernails or some sharp tool. Crude sketches of people, faces stretched in agony. A family. This family. Her daughter. Her son. Her. There were words, too, repeated over and over, scrawled in a frantic hand. It lives here. It waits. It remembers. A creak behind her. She turned. There was someone at the top of the stairs. Not the boy. The figure stood unnaturally tall, head crooked too far to one side. Its limbs were long, thin, like twisted branches. It didn't move, didn't breathe. It just watched. She ran. By the time she got upstairs, the door slammed shut behind her. She bolted it, though no lock would matter. Her daughter was in the hallway sobbing, saying the walls had been talking to her all night, that they told her the house needed something, a sacrifice. The police searched the house from top to bottom. Found nothing. No boy. No drawings. No figure. Just a frightened family and a quiet house. The mother tried to leave, packed their things, drove away. But after hours on the road, she realized the streets never changed. The signs were the same. They were driving in circles. Every turn brought them back to the same road, the same woods, the same driveway. They were trapped. That night, she found her son sitting on the edge of her bed. He looked the same, but there was something wrong with his eyes. Too dark. Too still. "Where did you go?" she whispered. He smiled, but it wasn't his smile. "I went where it sleeps." "Who?" "It doesn't have a name. Not anymore. It forgot. But it remembers us." She reached for him, but he vanished like smoke. Gone. The daughter wouldn't wake up the next morning. Her body was there, warm, breathing, but her mind was somewhere else. Eyes wide open, but staring through everything. She whispered constantly, too soft to hear at first, but eventually the mother made out the words. "It's building something, in the walls." The mother tore through the house in desperation, ripped down paneling, pulled up floorboards, and then she found it, in the wall behind the boy's closet, a narrow tunnel, carved into the foundation. She crawled through it, scraping her skin on the rough stone. The air smelled like rot and old earth. At the end of the tunnel was a chamber, not man-made. It felt ancient. The walls pulsed like something alive, and in the center, something was growing. A shape formed from pieces of the house: wood, nails, insulation, cloth, and bones. Human bones. It was making itself a body. Her daughter's voice echoed behind her. "It needs a name to finish. That's how it comes through." The mother turned. The girl was there, her eyes glowing faintly. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood the figure, no longer a shadow, no longer waiting. It whispered, and she understood, not in words, but in knowing. It had lived in the cracks of forgotten places, in orphaned buildings, in the memory of things that once were. It needed no ritual, no invitation, only attention, only fear, and now it was part of them. She fled the chamber, dragging her daughter with her. She boarded up the walls, poured salt, screamed prayers she barely believed in, but nothing stopped it. Every night it got closer. She would wake with dirt under her fingernails, not knowing what she dug. The lights would flicker in patterns like Morse code. The attic reappeared, only now it breathed. She finally understood the truth. They hadn't moved into the house. They had moved into it. The structure wasn't built. It was born. Fed by tragedy, forgotten by time, every family that vanished here had added to its form. Every scream was a brick, every soul a nail. And now it was almost done. She made one final choice. She burned it, drenched every room in fuel, lit a match, and held her children close as the flames took hold. The house screamed, the walls twisted. The thing inside thrashed and howled, denied its vessel. But in the end, fire remembers no names. When the neighbors saw the smoke, they called the authorities. But by the time the fire trucks arrived, there was nothing left but ash and silence. No remains, no family, only a blackened lot where nothing grows, and a narrow crack in the earth where, if you press your ear against it, You might hear breathing, waiting, still waiting. The rain beat against the windows of the old house, a relentless drum that seemed to echo the pounding of my heart. I sat alone in the living room, the dim glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the walls. The furniture was old, draped in dust-covered sheets, and the air carried the musty scent of neglect. I'd inherited the place from my uncle, a man I barely knew, who'd lived here in solitude until his death a month ago. The will had been clear. The house was mine, but I had to spend one night in it before I could claim it. A strange condition, but I wasn't one to turn down a free property, no matter how creepy the place felt. The storm outside grew fiercer, thunder rumbling like a warning. I shifted on the sagging couch, trying to shake the unease creeping up my spine. The house was too quiet, save for the rain and the occasional creak of the floorboards settling. I told myself it was just an old building, nothing more. But the shadows seemed to move when I wasn't looking, and every so often, I swore I heard a faint whisper, like someone calling my name from far away. I checked my phone for the 100th time. No signal. Of course, the nearest town was miles away and the storm wasn't helping. I stood, pacing to shake off the nerves. The house was huge, with too many rooms and too many corners for one person to feel safe. My uncle's letter, tucked in with the will, had warned me not to wander too far from the main rooms. "Stay where it's safe," he'd written in shaky handwriting. I'd laughed it off at the time, but now, standing in the cavernous hallway, I felt the weight of his words. The air grew colder as I moved deeper into the house, the lamp's light barely reaching the walls. I stopped at the base of the staircase, staring up into the darkness of the second floor. Something about it felt wrong, like the darkness was watching me back. I turned away, ready to head back to the living room, when I heard it, a soft thump from upstairs. My breath caught, and I froze, straining to listen. The rain made it hard to be sure, but then it came again, louder this time, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. My mind raced. Animals? Squatters? Or just the house settling? I grabbed the flashlight from my bag, its beam cutting through the gloom as I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. The air grew colder with every step, and the whispers I'd thought I imagined grew clearer, though I couldn't make out the words. At the top, a long hallway stretched out, lined with closed doors. The dragging sound had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against my ears. I called out, my voice trembling. "Hello? Is someone there?" No answer, but the shadows seemed to shift like they were closing in. I gripped the flashlight tighter and opened the first door on my right. It was a bedroom, empty except for a rusted bed frame and a cracked mirror on the wall. The mirror caught my reflection, and for a split second, I thought I saw something move behind me. A shape, too tall, too thin, too wrong. I spun around, heart hammering, but the hallway was empty. I shut the door, my hands shaking. I was imagining things. Had to be. The storm, the isolation, the creepy house, it was all getting to me. I moved to the next door, telling myself I'd check one more room and then go back downstairs. This one was different. The air inside was thick, almost suffocating, and the faint smell of something metallic hung in the air. Blood? No, that was ridiculous. But as my flashlight swept the room, it landed on something that made my stomach lurch. A trapdoor in the floor, partially hidden under a frayed rug. It was padlocked, but the lock was rusted, and the wood around it looked splintered, like someone had tried to pry it open. I knelt beside it, my curiosity battling my fear. Why would my uncle have a locked trap door in his house? What was he hiding? I tugged at the lock, and to my surprise, it gave way with a brittle snap. The trapdoor creaked as I lifted it, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A cold draft rose from below, carrying with it a sound, a low, rhythmic hum, like someone chanting under their breath. My instincts screamed at me to close the door and run, but something compelled me to keep going. Maybe it was the need to understand why my uncle had been so secretive, why he'd lived alone in this decaying place. I descended the stairs, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. The humming grew louder, more distinct, and I realized it wasn't one voice but many, overlapping in a way that made my skin crawl. The stairs ended in a small, damp basement, its walls lined with shelves of dusty jars and strange symbols carved into the stone. In the center of the room was a circle of candles, long extinguished, surrounding a small, leather-bound book. The humming stopped the moment my foot touched the floor, and the silence was worse, absolute, like the world was holding its breath. I approached the book, my flashlight shaking in my hand. Its cover was worn, the pages yellowed and brittle. I opened it, and the words inside were written in a language I couldn't read, interspersed with drawings of twisted humanoid figures with too many limbs. My uncle's handwriting was scrawled in the margins, frantic and barely legible. "They're here," one note read. "They never leave." My heart pounded as I flipped through the pages, each one more disturbing than the last. The final page was a sketch of the house, with a single sentence beneath it. "They come when you sleep." A loud crash from upstairs made me drop the book. The sound echoed, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming closer. I grabbed the book and bolted up the stairs, slamming the trapdoor shut behind me. The footsteps were in the hallway now, slow and methodical, like whoever it was knew exactly where I was. I ran to the living room, barricading the door with a chair, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The footsteps stopped just outside, and then there was a knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My eyes darted to the windows, but the storm was still raging, and there was nowhere to go. The knocking came again, louder this time, and then a voice, low, guttural, not entirely human. "You shouldn't have gone downstairs," it said. My blood ran cold. I clutched the book to my chest as if it could protect me and backed toward the corner of the room. The door rattled, the chair scraping against the floor as something pushed against it. And then, silence. Minutes passed, maybe hours, and nothing happened. My legs gave out and I slid to the floor, trembling. The storm was quieter now, the rain a soft patter. I told myself it was over, that I'd imagined it all. But when I looked down at the book in my hands, it was open to a page I hadn't seen before, a drawing of me, sitting in this exact corner, with a shadowed figure looming behind me. My heart stopped as I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty, the chair still against the door. I laughed, a shaky, desperate sound, trying to convince myself I was losing it. But then the lamp flickered, and in the brief moment of darkness, I saw it, a figure in the corner, tall and thin, its face a blur of shadows. When the light came back, it was gone. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing my bag and the book, ready to run, but the door was open now, the chair pushed aside. I hadn't heard it move. I bolted out of the house, the rain soaking me instantly as I sprinted to my car. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the driveway, the house disappearing into the storm behind me. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town, my hands shaking on the wheel. I checked into a motel, locking the door and collapsing onto the bed, the book still clutched in my hands. I couldn't bring myself to open it again, but I couldn't let it go either. The next morning, I called a lawyer to renounce my claim to the house. I didn't care about the money or the property, I just wanted to be done with it. But when I described the house, the lawyer went quiet. "That's strange," he said. "Your uncle's house burned down years ago. There's nothing left but ashes." I froze, my eyes drifting to the book on the motel bed. It was open again, to a new page, a sketch of me, sitting in this exact room, with the same shadowed figure standing behind me, and this time I could hear it breathing. The storm raged outside, a relentless howl that shook the windows of the old house I'd rented on the edge of town. The place was a relic, its weathered walls and sagging roof barely holding together, but it was all I could afford after the divorce. The furniture was sparse, left behind by whoever lived here last, and the air carried a faint, sour smell, like wet leaves rotting in a forgotten corner. I stood in the living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes, my breath visible in the chilly air despite the furnace humming in the basement. The power flickered, the single bulb overhead buzzing like an angry insect, and I felt it immediately, a prickle of unease, like the house was watching me. I'd barely settled in when I heard it. A sharp, rhythmic scratching, like claws dragging across wood coming from the attic. I froze, my hands tightening around a box of dishes. The sound stopped, then started again, slower, deliberate, as if something was testing my nerve. I set the box down, my heart thudding, and grabbed a flashlight from my bag. The house was too quiet now, the storm's roar muffled, like the walls were swallowing sound. I told myself it was probably a rat, or maybe a loose shutter caught in the wind, but my gut twisted with a deeper fear. I'd heard stories about this place, whispers from neighbors about lights in the windows at night, even when no one lived here. The stairs to the attic were behind a narrow door in the hallway, the kind you'd miss if you weren't looking. The scratching grew louder as I approached, each scrape sending a shiver down my spine. I opened the door, the hinges groaning, and shone the flashlight up the steep, dusty steps. The air was colder here, thick with the smell of mold and something sharper, almost metallic. I called out, my voice thin and shaky. "Hello? Is someone up there?" No answer, just the scratching, now joined by a faint tapping, like a finger on glass. I should have turned back, but something pulled me forward, a mix of fear and stubborn curiosity. The attic was a maze of shadows, the flashlight's beam cutting through cobwebs and dust. Old furniture was piled against the walls, chairs with broken legs, a cracked mirror, a trunk with rusted hinges. The scratching stopped the moment I stepped onto the creaking floorboards, replaced by an oppressive silence that made my ears ring. I swept the light around, catching glimpses of faded photographs pinned to the rafters, their edges curled like dead leaves. They showed people I didn't recognize, their faces pale, their eyes wide and unblinking, staring directly at the camera. My stomach churned as I realized they were all taken in this house. Same walls, same windows, same heavy air. I moved toward the trunk, drawn to it despite the voice in my head screaming to leave. The tapping started again, coming from inside the trunk now, faint but insistent. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid, the hinges screeching. Inside was a jumble of old clothes, yellowed letters, and a small leather-bound journal. The tapping stopped, and for a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. But then the mirror across the attic caught my eye. In its reflection, I saw myself, pale, sweating, holding the journal. But behind me was something else, a shape, tall and thin, its edges blurred like smoke, standing just out of reach. I spun around, the flashlight shaking in my grip, but the attic was empty. My breath came in short gasps as I opened the journal, its pages brittle and stained. The handwriting was frantic, scrawled in black ink, describing things that made my skin crawl, shadows that moved on their own, voices whispering in the dark, a presence that grew stronger the longer someone stayed in the house. The last entry was a single sentence. "It knows I see it." I dropped the journal, my heart pounding, and the scratching started again, louder, coming from the walls now, like something was clawing its way out. The flashlight flickered, and in the brief darkness, I heard a low, guttural laugh, close enough to feel the breath on my neck. I stumbled back, tripping over a chair, and ran for the stairs. The attic door slammed shut behind me, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I yanked at the handle, but it wouldn't budge, like something was holding it from the other side. The scratching grew frantic, joined by a whisper, my name, spoken in a voice that wasn't human. I pounded on the door, screaming, and it finally gave way, sending me tumbling into the hallway. I scrambled to my feet, the flashlight beam darting wildly, and saw it, a shadow at the end of the hall, tall and distorted, its limbs bending at wrong angles. It didn't move, just stood there, watching. I ran to the living room, slamming every door behind me, and shoved a couch against the hallway entrance. The whispers followed, seeping through the walls, a chorus of voices now all saying, "You saw us." The power went out completely, plunging the house into darkness, and my flashlight died, leaving me blind. I fumbled for my phone, but the screen was black, the battery drained. The air grew heavier, the sour smell stronger, and I felt it, a presence, close, pressing against me like a weight. Something cold brushed my arm, and I screamed, swinging blindly with the journal still clutched in my hand. The lights flickered back on, weak and unsteady, and I saw the photographs from the attic scattered across the floor, though I hadn't brought them down. They were different now. Each one showed me, standing in the house, my face pale, my eyes wide and unblinking, just like the people in the attic photos. In every image, the shadow was there, closer each time, its blurred form sharpening into something almost human. but not quite. I backed against the wall, my breath ragged, and noticed something new, a faint outline on the wallpaper, like a door that hadn't been there before. I pressed my hand against it, and the wall gave way, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The whispers grew louder, urging me downward, and though every instinct screamed to run, I couldn't. The house wouldn't let me. I stepped onto the stairs, the air growing colder, the smell of rot overwhelming. The staircase ended in a small, damp room, its walls covered in symbols carved deep into the stone. In the center was a circle of candles, their wicks blackened but unlit, and a single photograph lying on the floor. It was me, taken moments ago, standing at the top of the stairs, the shadow's hand on my shoulder. I dropped the journal, my hands shaking, and the candles flared to life, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls. The whispers became a scream, a single word repeated over and over. "Stay!" I turned to run, but the staircase was gone. The wall sealed shut behind me. The shadow was in the room now, its form solidifying, tall, gaunt, with eyes like black pits that swallowed the light. It reached for me, its fingers cold and sharp, and I fell to my knees, clutching the photograph. The symbols on the walls pulsed, glowing red, and the shadow recoiled, hissing like static. I grabbed the journal and tore at the pages, scattering them across the floor. The candles flared brighter, and the shadow screamed, its form unraveling like smoke. The symbols dimmed, the whispers faded, and the wall opened again, revealing the staircase. I ran, not looking back, and burst into the living room, the storm still raging outside. The front door was open now, swinging in the wind, and I sprinted into the rain, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove, the house disappearing in the rearview mirror, and didn't stop until I was miles away, shivering in a motel parking lot. I thought it was over. I burned the photograph and the journal, hoping to erase what I'd seen. But weeks later, in a new apartment, I found a crack in the bedroom wall, barely noticeable behind the bed. I pried it open, my hands shaking, and found a single photograph tucked inside. It was me, standing in that basement room, the shadow's arms wrapped around me, its face clear now, my face twisted into a smile I didn't recognize. The air grew heavy, the sour smell returned, and from the walls came a faint scratching, slow and deliberate, like something was clawing its way back. It started with a knock on the window, not the door, the window. The sound was faint at first, almost like a branch brushing against the glass. But there were no trees outside that window, only an open stretch of flat land and a road that curved into a thick forest. That's what made it strange. The house sat isolated on the edge of nowhere, and nothing ever came from that road. Nothing ever knocked. Emily froze in the middle of brushing her teeth. She was alone. Her husband was out of town on a work trip, and the nearest neighbor was half a mile away. The knock came again, a little louder this time, measured, intentional. She crept down the hallway barefoot, toothbrush still in hand, foam gathering in the corners of her mouth. As she approached the living room, the knocking stopped. A soft tap, and then silence. She peered out through the blinds. No one, just her own reflection staring back, caught in the dim light of the table lamp behind her. A chill crept down her back. She shut the blinds, locked the front door again, and turned off the lights. Maybe it was her imagination. Maybe it was an animal. She finished brushing her teeth, turned off the bathroom light, and climbed into bed, trying to shake the unease growing in her chest. That night, she barely slept. Around midnight, she heard scratching. Not on the window. Inside the house. It came from behind the closet door in the guest room, just down the hall. The noise was subtle, almost shy, like fingernails dragging across wood. Then a thump, followed by another, soft, like something falling in slow motion. She sat up, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the bedroom door. The house was silent again. She waited, barely breathing. Nothing. She convinced herself it was the house settling. The next morning, when she walked past the guest room, the door was wide open. She didn't remember leaving it that way. Inside, the closet door was cracked open. She didn't check it. By the time evening came, she had mostly convinced herself there was a rational explanation. Stress, lack of sleep, maybe even a dream. That's what she told her sister on the phone. But when she hung up, she noticed something odd. Her phone's call log showed the conversation had lasted less than a minute. They'd spoken for almost 15. That night, she made sure every door was locked and every window shut tight. She even propped a chair under the doorknob of the guest room just in case. But just after she turned off the lights and lay down, she heard it again. The knock, not on the window this time, on the bedroom door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. Her body refused to listen. The door creaked slightly, just enough to make a sound, not enough to open. She stared into the dark until the knocking stopped, then silence again. When the sun rose, she opened the bedroom door, heart pounding, expecting to find something. There was nothing, but the chair she had wedged under the guest room doorknob was now in the middle of the hallway. She decided to leave the house, just for the day, get some air, get away. She drove into town, sat in a cafe, tried to distract herself, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. When she got back to the house later that afternoon, the front door was unlocked. She was sure she had locked it. She stepped inside cautiously. Everything looked the same until she entered the kitchen. All the drawers were open, every single one. Neatly pulled out, nothing missing, nothing disturbed, just open. She backed out, grabbed her keys, and left again. That night she stayed in a motel, but she couldn't escape the house entirely. She dreamed of it. She dreamed of standing in the guest room, staring at the closet door, unable to move. Something breathing behind it. Something waiting. She returned the next morning, telling herself she had to face whatever was happening. She had to understand. Maybe it was in her head, but maybe it wasn't. She walked from room to room, filming everything on her phone, narrating as she went, trying to make sense of what had changed, what had moved. When she got to the guest room, the closet door was shut again. She pressed record. She opened the door. Nothing inside, just coats, a few boxes, a dusty floor. But as she turned off the camera, something caught her eye. There were footprints, barefoot, small, almost like a child's, trailing out of the closet and stopping just behind where she was standing. She spun around. No one. That night, she stayed up with the lights on. Around 2 a.m, her phone rang. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again, same number. She answered this time. Silence, and then, very faintly, her own voice, playing back what she had recorded earlier that day. Her hand went cold. She hung up, heart racing, and went to her video library. The clip was gone. The next day, she went to the police. They listened politely, checked the house, found nothing. Told her it might be stress, or perhaps someone playing a prank. But when she asked about fingerprints or cameras, they gently deflected. There was nothing they could do. She felt stupid, and more afraid than ever. When her husband returned 2 days later, she expected relief, safety. But things got worse. He dismissed her stories at first, thought she was exhausted. But then he saw it too. One morning, he opened the fridge and found all the food stacked in a neat pile on the floor. Every item, unopened, perfectly balanced. He laughed nervously and asked if she'd done it. She shook her head. That night, he set up cameras. They recorded everything. Around midnight, something stepped into the hallway. But not from the front door. Not from outside. It emerged from the guest room closet. The figure was vague, tall, almost human, but wrong in proportion. The footage glitched when it moved, skipping frames. It stopped in front of their bedroom, knocked on the door, and then vanished. The file corrupted before it finished. He wanted to leave immediately, sell the house, burn it even, but she said no. She needed to know what it was. So the next night, she sat alone in the guest room, camera in hand, closet door open, waiting. For hours, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the camera shut off. Darkness. The closet door slammed shut on its own, and something whispered behind her ear. "You should never have opened it." She screamed. The lights flickered. The bedroom door flung open, and her husband rushed in, only to find her alone, crouched in the corner, shaking. She didn't speak for hours. That morning, they left, moved in with her sister, told themselves it was over. But that night, she found something on her pillow. A small piece of paper, folded, inside, written in perfect handwriting. "You brought it with you." They never went back to the house. But they weren't alone in the new one. Footsteps began to echo at night. Doors opened on their own. Her husband started having weird dreams at night. Then he stopped dreaming altogether because he stopped sleeping. Whatever it was had followed them, and each time they tried to run, it got closer. They moved twice more, each time hoping to escape. But it didn't matter where they went. They weren't running from the house. They were running from something she had awakened the moment she opened that closet. Something that had been waiting. Something that had no name, no face, and no rules, and now it was part of them, waiting for the next knock. Thank you for listening. Hope I didn't scare you too much. If you like my stories, please consider giving me a like and subscribe. See you next time.